Hello and welcome to Name on the Trophy, the new Manchester United podcast and YouTube show hosted by me, Dominic Booth. Manchester United on a massive up at the moment, so we're going to be chatting about the latest win over Wolves and talking about the general mood around the club and also the opening of the January transfer window. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Sophie Richards from Ladies in Red YouTube channel. So thanks very much for guesting on today's podcast.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for asking me to come on. It's my debut. And
Yeah.
as you say, it's nice to come on when United are on a up as well. So there's plenty to talk about.
Yeah, it's always good when United are winning, and it does feel. I think you said in a tweet today, actually, so that it's quite enjoyable to watch United at the moment, and feels like a really good mood around the place, and that's not just because Cristiano Ronaldo was gone. The results are not bad either. Just on the Wolves game first, so obviously all the headlines about Marcus Rashford, and I guess rightly so, but it kind of felt like one of those games in the past that I think United wouldn't have won. In the Solskjaer era, I'd lost count of those draws and defeats against Wolves in particular. Seem to play Wolves all the time and never win. But United in a similar sort of game on New Year's Eve came away with the result when they might not have done.
Yeah, I think I hate playing Wolves anyway. If
Yeah.
you know my background, you'll know my dad is a massive Wolves fan. So that rivalry obviously runs quite deep in my family. And Wolves always seem to turn up against us no matter what form they're in, how their season's going. When we're in town, Wolves just always seem to step up. So I hate it when we're playing at the Molyneux in particular. And it's one of them games that I always just am glad to get out of the way. And you're right in what you're saying. I don't think we particularly played well, but it's one of them where we kind of ground out the result. Rashford obviously came on and had an impact, which was brilliant after what had happened prior to the game as well. But yeah, I just think it shows progress from our team, that resilience that we have, and that we do keep going until the end. We looked out of ideas at one point, but then out of the blue, we have a bit of quality from Rashford. And to be a top team, you need to get results on those days when it's not going so well for you. And luckily, we did that against Wolves.
What did you make of the leaving Rashford on the bench decision? It's sort of on news now, and I think most of the reaction has been sort of praising Ten Hag for his ruthlessness, and Rashford seemed to accept it in his post-match interview. He said, "I was late for a team meeting," and sort of take it on the chin and move on. He obviously proved the point in the second half anyway.
Yeah, I think Rashford obviously has been flying, and everyone was a bit bemused when we saw him on the bench. And then the news come out, oh, there was some kind of internal disciplinary and whatnot. And I already saw tweets on like on Twitter and stuff saying, oh, it's not a coincidence that Lingard was in town the other day and now Rashford's being disciplined and all this. And I'm just like some people go over the top way too easily. And then all of a sudden it comes out it was just a minor oversleep. And I mean, I think Ten Hag dealt with it perfectly well, as did Marcus Rashford, very professional the way they came on. Might have been a different story if you lose that game and Rashford doesn't score that goal, and maybe people look at it a bit differently. But no, I think it was the right call. I think yet again, Ten Hag standing obviously in his place and he's saying, I'm the boss, and that we've needed that. It's a bit refreshing as a United fan to see that. And like I say, Rashford, I think responded in the best possible way, and we move on from it. We don't need to dwell on it. But yeah, I think Ten Hag rightly so being praised for it.
Yeah, maybe it's another one of those in another day, another era. Maybe under Rangnick last year when he made a couple of decisions like that,
Yeah.
there was a massive furore about it, wasn't there? And maybe Ronaldo is an example of a player who would have obviously maybe kicked up more of a fuss than Rashford.
Yeah. It shows his professionalism, doesn't it? Obviously, we know off the pitch last season, it's no secret that Rashford was well below par. A lot of people writing him off, and you can see from on a human level, like he just wasn't right. He wasn't happy in himself, and I'm just so happy to see him smiling on the pitch again. And then obviously that is evident in his performances and the way that he's playing and his attitude, as we've just talked about as well. I mean, it's an absolute credit, and he's shutting his haters up, which you love to see.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, another player potentially silencing the haters is Aaron Wan-Bissaka. I spoke a little bit about this on my previous podcast with Rob Blanchett, and at that time it was just after he came back in the Carabao Cup game against Burnley, played well, got the assist, and Rob sort of said, I think he's just putting himself in the shop window. It's probably not something that's the start of a run or a kind of rejuvenated Wan-Bissaka who can actually compete for a first team spot. But 2 league performances down the line, Sophie, I'm inclined now to disagree with that. And I think that Wan-Bissaka is showing that he still has something to offer.
Definitely, I think that Wan-Bissaka can be so infuriating at times. We all know it as a fan. Defensively, we know he's quality, but going forwards, that's where he falls short. And to be a fullback at United, you need to be good going forwards as well. I think that the biggest shock this season is Dalot's transformation and how Dalot has really come on under Ten Hag. Like, he has improved dramatically. And Wan-Bissaka, unfortunately, obviously, has suffered as a result of that. I think Dalot's performances have rightly kept Wan-Bissaka out. But Wan-Bissaka obviously has to think about his own career and where he wants to go. He wants to be playing regular football, and is he going to get that at United? And I think that question is still there. When Dalot comes back, you expect him to come straight back in. But no doubt about it, his performances, Wan-Bissaka, he could have quite easily bowed his head, waited for the transfer window to come and kind of just drizzled out. But he hasn't. He's put in performances that, you know what, I'm still here. And he's shocked me with his performances, to be fair. I think he's played well. He's been up and down. Like you say, got the assist against Burnley as well, which was a great assist, by the way. Like the way that he pulled that back was quality. And I think he's putting his name out there. He's saying, you know what, to Ten Hag, I am still here, because he kind of has become the forgotten man. Everyone was expecting him just to be the first name out, really, in January. And then given a chance, obviously, with Delot's injury, he's definitely taken the chance. So time will tell on that one, I think. I think if he goes, I can understand it completely, because like I say, he has to think of his own personal career. Is he going to be getting regular minutes at United? But if he stays, he's definitely useful for us to have in our squad, and I think he's proved his worth in his last few games.
Yeah, United didn't have anyone, did they, as a right back cover in the first half of the season? Also, I think Wan-Bissaka had a bit of illness and injury, but he played 4 league minutes. That was the end of the Liverpool game, so it wasn't really it wasn't a first half of the season to speak of. I think that maybe the break has done Wan-Bissaka some good. He probably needs to improve a bit going forward. Still, it's like time. We say this time after time with Wan-Bissaka. We said it under Solskjaer, and I still don't think against Wolves he didn't actually do that much going forward, but he was really vital defensively, especially like late on in the game, putting his body on the line for the team, making blocks and tackles, and seeing out the win.
Yeah, definitely. Like I say, he's proved his worth. He's proved he still offers something to this team. Definitely, defensively, like I've already mentioned, he's solid. But obviously, for United, for us to move forward as a team, we've seen all of the top teams have attacking fullbacks and players who can be an extra addition going forwards and can be a weapon, if you like. When Wan-Bissaka, as you mentioned, against Wolves, doesn't really give that. But certain games, not every game, you're going to want attacking fullback. Certain games, you're going to need somebody who's a bit more disciplined to sit in there, depending on who you play against, especially when you're playing Europe. So I think that's what I mean when he definitely can still offer something. It's whether he's happy with, obviously, the minutes that he's offered at United. I think that'll be the sticking point for him, really. But yeah, defensively, he's outstanding. And he proved that with 2 vital blocks at the weekend against Wolves.
Yeah, that's interesting you mentioned there, like certain players are going to be useful for certain games. I tweeted during the Wolves game that I just didn't think it was the right game for Christian Eriksen. He seemed to sort of flit out of the game a little bit. He looked a little bit leggy and lethargic to me. And I think United actually improved when Fred came on. And I think Ten Hag mentioned that after the game, that Fred won a lot of second balls and got about the pitch a little bit more maybe than Eriksen was doing. We obviously know Eriksen has massively changed that United midfield and how they dominate certain games. And his passing is infinitely better than Fred's. I'm a big defender of Fred, as many people will know. But I do sort of think that there is going to be games where Ten Hag, like you say, you might choose Wan-Bissaka over Dalot, and he might choose Fred over Eriksen in the midfield, especially maybe with a derby and big games like that coming up for United.
Definitely, and obviously look at the Luke Shaw Malassi situation as well. Look, it's the same thing that we want competition in places. We need a strong squad. I know the transfer window's open, and we're going to talk about that. But we need definitely invest with players, but not only that are available, but players who actually are as good as the quality that are on the pitch. We don't want that big downgrade that we've seen in previous seasons. We need that quality throughout the squad. Players who can fill in, like Luke Shaw stepped in at centre back, for example, and he's been outstanding. And I really respect that and rate that, the fact that he's put his hand up and said, you know what, boss, I'll play centre back, and I think that shows great from him. And again, Malacia has been quality on that left-hand side as well. So I just feel like, we just need competition in areas. Fred gives us something a bit different in that midfield. He's not as good on the ball, you'd say, as Eriksen, but in terms of his rattiness and his tenacity in there, it's fairly unmatched. Fred in there with Casemiro as well. I mean, I wouldn't want to play against that midfield pair indefinitely. And I just think they offer something a bit different, a bit more resilience in there.
Yeah, I think for the derby, I think it should be Fred, Casemiro and Eriksen. And Fernandes, with Eriksen coming off the bench. Maybe if United need a goal or something. I just think that Ten Hag seems to really, really trust Eriksen. He's played almost every minute in the league under him. Do you think that's the sort of a bond, or just a player that he feels can translate his style of football to the rest of the side almost?
Last season, if you look at our midfield, we did not control any games at all. And I think this season, especially with Eriksen in there, and now Casemiro obviously finding his feet as well, I feel like we have a lot more control in that midfield area. The Wolves game is a good example. How many times have we gone to Wolves and Moutinho and Neves have run the show against us? They've literally completely bossed it. It wasn't like that. It was more of a scrappy affair, to be fair, in the middle against Wolves. They didn't really get the ball down. We didn't really get the ball down. It was one of them. But previous times we would have lost that game because the ball would have went onto the edge of the Neves, and we know what he can do from there and whatnot. So I just think that tenacity, if you want like a midfield who are going to hunt, who are going to press, who are going to just be an absolute nightmare to play against, you go for the likes of Fred and Casemiro. For those games where we're going to have a bit more control and a bit more of the ball, and we want those those unlocking passes, that's what Eriksen is there for, and that's what Bruno is there for. I think the difference with Bruno and obviously Eriksen is that Bruno is that player to get about the pitch. We know that he gets about the pitch, and he can be that little tenacious one in there as well as being the playmaker, whereas Eriksen is a bit more passive when it gets a bit more like that in the midfield. When there's time, and when he's allowed to pick a pass, then Eriksen is definitely your guy. But yeah, I think the City game be interesting because we're going to have less of the ball, you would think. So it's going to be about us making it as uncomfortable, especially in that midfield for City as we can. And you'd like to think Fred and Casemiro would do that.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. Hopefully it'll be a bit different from the game at the Etihad earlier in the season, where I don't think any of United players got near the ball at any stage, did they? Yeah, that was painful to watch that one. You talked a little bit about transfers there, Sophie, and a lot of the chat at the moment is about Joao Felix relating to United. It's a tricky one, I think, for a lot of people. I see a lot of excitement on Twitter about Joao Felix and £20 million loan fees being mentioned, and even bigger fees like that in the future if it was to be from a permanent deal. Atletico obviously quite keen to get rid of him. Arsenal also mentioned quite a lot in a few reports. Is this a sort of, I think it might be a case of the right deal at the wrong time for United, in terms of the player is obviously really high caliber. He is a forward, but is he the forward that United need? And £20 million or €20 million loan fee, whatever it may be, just seems like a huge amount to pay for 6 months.
It is. I think the money is the biggest thing there. You're talking about obviously a 6-month loan deal. There was no option to buy, I believe, at the end of that as well. It's just, like you say, I like Joao Felix, and it's nothing against him as a player, and I think he'd definitely bring us something different. But in general, I think he's not the kind of striker that we should be looking at. He's not the out-and-out 9, if you say. He's more of a CF, isn't he? He's more of one to rotate or play just behind, you'd say. And we've already got the likes of Bruno there. We've already got Eriksen who can play there. We've already got Martial who can kind of drop in there. Like, for me, we need an out-and-out 9. But how many 9s realistically are out there who are available right now as well? And I think it's...
Yeah. Not in January, that's the problem, isn't it? Not in January, really.
Exactly. So do we go for, oh, well, we need a bit more quality. If we're going to see it through to the end of the season, we need goal scorers. Do we just get... Do you know what I mean? But... for me, he's not the mould of striker. Would I frown at signing him? No, because I do think he's quality and he's obviously got a lot of potential. And I think it'd be interesting to see him in the Premier League as well. But is he with my go-to right now? I'd say no. And like I say, it's nothing against him. I do rate him as a player and I think he is quality. But we've done this in the past where we've just signed big names and they don't really fit what we're trying to do with our team. They don't really fit the setup. And I don't think Ten Hag is like that. I think he wants players who are specific to his style. He looks for a particular type of player. And yeah, I think Arsenal, I could see him going more to Arsenal than us, if I'm honest, unless we're going to spend stupid money. But with the wholesale speculation and whatnot, are we going to be spending that type of money? I can't really see that.
No, and it's probably another stick with which fans, and maybe rightly so, will used to be the Glazers if they refuse to spend on a position which is obviously really needed in January. But January is so tricky. Just to illustrate that point, though, just looking at the numbers now, United have scored the fewest goals out of anyone in the top 6. They've even scored fewer than Fulham. Their goal difference is worse than every other team in the top 6 as well, by quite a margin as well. I mean, only these last 2 games have actually taken it into positives on +4, and they've only scored 24 in 16 games. So it is obvious where they need to strengthen. And Martial's not, for me, pulling up trees especially since the restart. He was good in bits and starts before, but wasn't really fit often enough. So it is a massive need, and fans are right to cry out for it, but it's just it's the feasibility of it, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I read a tweet the other day, I don't know who did it, but they're about Harry Kane and obviously Spurs situation, and people can still see Harry Kane ended up at United. And for me, I'll be risking losing out on a proper 9 to then just sign someone who could possibly fit the mould. But it'd be like, it reminds me of Juan Mata when we signed Mata and we forced him out wide all the time, and we all know how he affected the game best in that 10. And we kind of accommodated players, and I just don't want to see that. I want to see players who are bought for a purpose, who fit the style of Ten Hag, not just because of their name and what they bring. But yeah, I just think we need to sign quality players. And January, with the wholesale speculation, I'm not optimistic about us really adding any anything major. I hope I'm wrong, of course, because we are screaming out for that centre forward, but does it mean that we hold on for the rest of this season, hopefully get our objectives, and then sign a proper 9, someone like Kane at the start of next season? Would United fans settle for that, with a sale obviously being done in that process as well? It's interesting. It's really interesting because everything's kind of up in the air at the moment, and you don't really know what to expect as a fan. When Ten Hag first came in the summer, we all knew we were going to make signings. But now, where we're at, we're kind of like, we know we need to, but if we don't, but for the greater good, we'll accept it. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's where are at fans at the moment. So
it's like two things need to continue the momentum of the results, and obviously what Ten Hag is doing, and the performance levels which have been high, and then the momentum from the takeover talk, which has sort of gone quiet, and fans are desperate for that to continue. So those two things, I can't see them. They'll both rumble on until the summer, hopefully, and then maybe we'll see change. Then what do you reckon for the rest of the season if United don't get a striker? Are you sticking with Martial, or Rashford down the middle is another option, I think, which fans are quite attracted to, given he seems to be playing quite physically strong at the moment, and obviously his goal record at the minute is absolutely fantastic, and Martial's flattering to deceive.
Yeah, I think, look, I've got a nickname on my channel. I call him Tony Partial, and that's because I think in flashes we see real quality, but then he just vanishes for a lot of the time that we see Martial there. And I think, well, we have to, don't we? We have to rely on the likes of Martial. Hope he can find some form. Hope Rashford can continue this form. But if there's any lessons to be learned, we've seen in previous years, we can't solely rely on these two to be our most consistent goal scorers. We do need other players to be chipping in, the likes of Bruno as well. Anthony, I think, needs to be stepping up a little bit more as well. Obviously, pay big money for him, and I think that he's another player who, I'm not going to judge him too harshly, but last 2 games he hasn't really been as effective as he was when we first signed him. So I just think that we need to spread the goals a little bit. I think that I'm not too concerned because we are creating the chances. It's not that we haven't been creating them, and it's almost like a matter of time until we score. But in previous seasons, we've literally not really created anything at all. So I do think there's a difference there. We are more creative going forwards. It's just about us being more clinical now. And hopefully whatever Rashford's been having, Martial can have some of the same, because we definitely need them to share the goals a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Good news with Jadon Sancho, I think, returning to Carrington as we record today as well. And Alejandro Garnacho, some people criticised him a little bit against Wolves. I actually thought, okay, he missed a really big chance, but I actually thought he was pretty good. And whenever we see Garnacho in the side, he always makes things happen. And sometimes he'll lose the ball and run into trouble, but he's an exciting player, and he adds to that mix, doesn't he? And with Sancho back as well, and Anthony, like you say, it's not like United don't have options. They just, like we've said countless times, they don't have that number 9.
Yeah, it's just that clinicalness in front of goal, isn't it? Sancho coming back is definitely a boost, and hopefully he's in the right headspace, to be ready, because we definitely need him 100%. Obviously, I already mentioned Anthony as well, but we definitely need fresh faces. Garnacho, I think, has been a breath of fresh air this season. I think his direct running, his willingness to go at defenders and be direct. He's not afraid. I think you need someone like that. You need players who are a bit rash still and can make stuff happen. And yeah, he had one chance still to start, but realistically, I was a bit baffled when he took him off when Semedo had been booked. I fancied Garnacho against him, to be honest with you. I felt like he had him. And obviously, I'm not begrudging it because Rashford came on and obviously scored and whatnot. But I just think Garnacho is a player that most fullbacks would not want to face, because he is so fearless and he will just go at them. And you see it a bit with Martinelli at Arsenal as well. I think I get the same kind of vibe there, where it's a player who can go either way, who's not afraid to take his man on. And again, it's refreshing to see as a United fan, because so long now we've seen our wingers just passing sideways and backwards, not taking a risk. Sometimes taking a risk, you're going to lose the ball. Sometimes it'll bobble into the bottom corner, just like he did against Fulham in the last dying kicks of the game. So it's just one of them, isn't it? You want to be entertained as fans ultimately, and I think Garnacho does that.
Yeah, I was at that Carabao Cup game against Villa before the break, when Garnacho came on, just completely changed the game and changed the feeling within the crowd as well. Every time he got on the ball, people on the edge of their seats, they were standing up. And like you say, that's what United are all about. It's a bit of a cliche, but United always have players like that. And Garnacho, you certainly don't want to be seeing United sign more wide players. And that's my worry with some of these transfers that you hear mentioned, and even the Cody Gakpo situation, which we've spoken about before on this podcast. If United had signed another player whose best position is out wide, you stunt the development of Garnacho. You maybe stop Sancho returning to the player that we all know he can be. He can even, I think United could probably even afford to send Elanga out on loan even if they don't get somebody. I know there's been Elanga to Everton loan talk. What do you think about that? I think that's a deal United can afford to do given how little Elanga has actually played.
Yeah, I think it is. Elanga's one of them players where, again, in flashes, I think he does some great things, and in others, he's just a bit frustrating. He's still a bit raw, isn't he? So I think a loan deal would be good for him to get that experience. I know Everton have been talked to be interested, which I think would be a very good loan move, to be honest. And Pellistри's another one as well. I would love to see a bit more of Pellistri. I don't think we've seen enough of him. I thought for Uruguay, when I've seen him, he looks sharp and he looks a very technical player. And he's another one that I'd like to eventually see more of. But I think that you are right. I think minutes are vital to these young players, especially players like Elanga, who have always been on the fringe of it, kind of. And I think it's a big test, really. If he goes to Everton and he absolutely smashes it, we'll be like, yeah, this kid's ready. But at the moment, with the minutes he's getting, it's hard to make that judgment, isn't it? So I think, yeah, I think a loan move, preferably to another Premier League team or even a Championship team, maybe like Ahmed's done, I think would be useful for Elanga, to be honest.
Yeah, it's probably quite appropriate that I actually forgot about Facundo Pellistri there. And I think maybe sometimes Ten Hag has forgotten about him because he just hasn't played, has he? He's just not. Yeah, I don't understand that. Even in the Cups, and he's not actually played a senior competitive game for United, I don't think. And his signing was 2 years ago. So, yeah, really odd one that. I was going to move on to Bournemouth next. I think Ten Hag did his pre-Bournemouth press conference earlier on today. Sweating on potentially Lisandro Martinez coming back into the side. Luke Shaw's been playing there. Otherwise, I don't see too many changes that he will make for this one. Injury depending before that. Ten Hag doesn't like doing that, does he? He likes to sort of continue the momentum of a winning side.
Yeah. I mean, the only one change I could possibly see is Rashford obviously playing instead of maybe Garnacho. I think he'll stick with Anthony. I think he needs a goal, or Anthony, to be honest, to give him a bit of a boost. And I think Ten Hag will recognise that and he'll stick with him. If Martinez is fit, for me, he comes straight back in. I know Luke Shaw has been outstanding, but for me, I'd slot Luke Shaw back at left back and put Martinez back in, just to keep that continuity with Varane in that midfield. I mean, that centre back, sorry, and then Casemiro in the midfield. I think it's important that you have a consistent core. And we've definitely reaped the rewards by keeping Varane and Martinez at centre backs when they have been fit. So yeah, I would definitely go for that. Dalot's situation, obviously, that's an interesting one, but you don't argue that Wan-Bissaka deserves to keep his place. So yeah, I can't really see too many changes. The only one really would be Martinez. If he's fit, I would put him straight back in, and Luke Shaw slot him across to left back.
Yeah, there's sure one at left centre back's been an interesting experiment, and maybe it's one that United they know they can now return to it if they need to, because I think he has done really well. And Ten Hag said, I think, that Shaw's left-footedness came into his thinking when making that selection, and it has left Harry Maguire on the fringes, and even transfer talk about Harry Maguire in January. Quickly on that, do you think that's premature? Do you think we can really be affording to ship out Harry Maguire for half of what we paid for him in January? I think he can still maybe prove a point, can't he?
Yeah, I think if there's any movement, it'll be in the summer, if nothing changes this half of the season for Harry Maguire. I don't think it'll happen in January. I don't think we can afford to get rid of him at this point in time. I know there's a lot of opinions on Harry Maguire, should I say, but personally, I think he's a good defender. I think the captaincy probably hasn't helped him. Mentally, he just hasn't really been, you'd say, a leader for United. And obviously, you always look to your captain, and we've been looking to Maguire so often, and his performances haven't been good enough. And I just don't think that added pressure's helped him. I think when you see him in an England shirt, I think he shows how valuable he can be to us. And yeah, so that's why I wouldn't write him off just yet. I don't think he'll go. If he does go, again, I totally understand it. I think he needs a fresh start. I think we're under no illusion to that. But I think at the moment, with him not starting so often, he'll maybe only start maybe cup games and whatnot. I think there's less attention on him as well. There's less of a spotlight on him. So yeah, I think it won't happen. If he does leave, I think it'll be in the summer. I can't really see that happening in January.
It was just getting to that point with Maguire where he just couldn't do anything right for United, could he? And the reaction around him was so fierce and so overblown at times. Ten Hag's done exactly the right thing by taking him out the firing line, even though it's been to obviously the detriment of his career, and it actually wasn't to the detriment of his England spot, was it? Because he still played a full part in that World Cup. But Martinez is the one, isn't he, that has to come back? And I actually forgot that Rashford didn't start against Wolves because he had such a big part. So I think that'll be 2 changes minimum. And then Dalot, I think it's probably a game for Dalot, Bournemouth, isn't it? United will need a really attacking performance for both their fullbacks, and Delo and Shaw are probably the two guys for that job.
Yeah, definitely. It just depends on whether obviously he's fit enough to come straight back in now. And obviously Ten Hag, I'm sure, will assess that. But if he doesn't, again, Wan-Bissaka, I don't think people can really moan if he does start over Delo. That is the case, because he's more than done enough to keep his spot, in my opinion. I do think going forwards we'd benefit from having Delo in this game. But defensively, there's no doubt about it. Bournemouth are obviously going to test our back line as well, and Wan-Bissaka's going to be called upon. So I just think it's one of them where he's good enough to do the job. Would I rather have Delo there? Of course, but not to the detriment of an injury, because I think Delo long term is much more important to us. So personally, I wouldn't make that change. I don't think I'd risk it for this game. I'd keep Wan-Bissaka, but yeah, we'll see how fit he is, I suppose.
Yeah, we've got that Everton game just 3 days on the back of this one
Yeah.
against Bournemouth. So that's probably the game where you can test the fitness of a couple of players and people can come in from the fringes, but the momentum has to build against Bournemouth. I was thinking in my mind, this might be the absolute kiss of death, but I do think it might be one of the easiest games in United's sort of post-Ferguson history to predict. Like, I just can't see anything other than a win the way that they're performing. But we have been here before against these sort of teams, and that just makes me scared, you know.
Yeah, we're not used to feeling confident, are we? Definitely not. What I will say, look, anybody can beat anybody in this league. We know that. We can't go complacent in any game, and we know we're in a running now for top four. And I just think that the most consistent team, quite simply, will get top four, and we need to just win all our games and take it each game at a time. We can't get ahead of ourselves at any point, even though we know that we could be a point off second or whatever if we win. I think we just need to take it one game at a time. We should beat Bournemouth, but we definitely need to be at our best, otherwise they will punish us, and it's like that for every game, isn't it? So yeah, I can't see anything other than a win as long as we turn up. I'm going to add that phrase at the end, as long as we turn up, because we know in some games we turn up partly, and I think if you do that, then we could definitely get hurt. So we need to be at it from the off.
Yeah, that Newcastle 0-0 earlier in the season at home sort of in my mind as one of those where United never got going, and the opposition were more than happy just to frustrate and just accept a draw, and United never found a way of breaking them down. But like you say, I think if United keep winning and beat City, then second place is actually within grasp. So, the top four race, daunting as having sort of Spurs and Liverpool right on the tail, is United can really take control of it by continuing this run, can't they?
Definitely, and I think a big part of it is keeping key players fit, which is why I think we need to be careful with, like, obviously a lot of congestion, a lot of games coming thick and fast. I think it's important we do rotate. If we do have a good first half, maybe rotate for the second half, and just let's not risk it with certain players. Martinez coming back in, for example, maybe we could switch him in the second half if we're doing well. And players like that, Delo, like, don't rush him back too early because we have got a lot of games, thick and fast. So a lot of players are going to get game time.
Varane as well, with Varane's sort of fitness record is a tricky one.
It is a tricky one, but how good has he been? He's been
Amazing.
outstanding, colossal at the back. But yeah, I just think that no matter who we're playing, I just think as long as we bring our A game, I genuinely do feel confident. I think that we've improved a lot this season. We have those moments of quality when we're not doing so well, which is great. Defensively, I think we've looked far more solid. It's just about that keeping that momentum going, isn't it? I think if we have a slip up or we have a major injury or anything like that, then obviously that can really massively affect the second half of the season, and obviously the January transfer window as well. It'd be interesting to see what happens there if we do sign anyone going forwards, because if you do, then obviously that adds confidence then for getting top four.
Yeah, I was saying to my mate when we went to the Burnley game, it would be really nice to see United just put 4, 5, 6 past the team. It hasn't happened recently.
Yeah.
It happened a little bit in the Solskjaer era, but it's
like Forest. I felt like we could, if we really wanted to. I felt like if we went a bit more, we could have, and we just seem to kind of just sit back, or we don't take our chances. But we are creating the chances, and that's the positive thing, I think.
Yeah, I think it will happen. It seems like you need the stars to align a little bit on those days when you get all the goals at once, like the Southampton 9-0 and all that. It seems like it just needs to click for a couple of people, maybe click for Martial, fall in the right place for him and get a goal, and then United go from there. I'm going to ask you for a prediction, Sophie, if that's all right. What do you reckon for this Bournemouth one?
Defensively, I think I very rarely predict as a clean sheet, to be fair, but I think I'm going to do it for once. I think I'm going to say 3-0 to United, and I'm hoping that Martinez will come back in and we'll keep another clean sheet. It'd be nice for Martial to get on the score sheet. I would love to see Casemiro getting a goal because I just love the guy so much. I think he's outstanding. And I'm going to say Rashford to continue his goal scoring form as well.
Yeah, I had 3-0 written down, but I'll go even more optimistic and say 4-0. I reckon a couple for Martial. I think that's what he needs, and maybe that'll quieten down some of the transfer talk and the Joao Felix mob out there demanding the signing. But we'll see how it goes anyway. That's all we've got time for actually. But thank you very much, Sophie, for being a guest on Name on the Trophy.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me on, and hopefully United get the 3 points and we do score 4 goals, like you said. That'd be nice.
Let's hope so. You can find Sophie on the Ladies in Red United YouTube channel, by the way. And to subscribe to this podcast on YouTube, we are Name on the Trophy, all the usual podcast places, as you all know. Thanks to Sophie, and thanks for listening. And that's all we've got time for. Cheers.